The rain was cold and heavy on the dark highway, headlights blurred on the wet asphalt. A black luxury SUV cut through the storm, its wipers fighting the downpour. Inside, Grace leaned back in the passenger seat, her hands on her round belly. 8 months pregnant, she whispered to the baby inside. Her husband, Ethan Cole, a 35-year-old millionaire CEO, focused on the road ahead. His phone buzzed again, another urgent message from the board. He silenced it. Jaw tight, tonight was supposed to be about family. Suddenly, a freight truck barreled through the intersection ahead. Its brakes screamed. The truck skidded sideways, blocking both lanes. The SUV swerved, tires screeched. The world spun. Grace's scream cut through the storm. The SUV spun toward the guardrail. Metal screamed against metal. The truck's massive grille loomed, ready to crush them, then everything froze. The truck stopped midair, suspended, as if invisible hands held it. The rain seemed to hang in place. On the side of the road stood a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 8, barefoot soaked, a torn yellow dress clung to her small frame. Her wide green eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Her trembling hands stretched toward the truck, palms shaking, but steady enough to hold the impossible. Grace gasped. Ethan stared, unable to move. The truck hovered above them, inches from the hood. The girl's lips moved silently. Her body quivered under the strain. Then, with a soft cry, she lowered her hands. The truck dropped gently onto the pavement, settling with a deep metallic groan. The SUV came to a stop. Ethan jumped out into the rain. The girl collapsed to her knees, shivering. Her small chest rose and fell rapidly. She looked exhausted, almost lifeless. Grace struggled out. Clutching her belly, she knelt beside the child. "Sweetheart, are you hurt?" Grace's voice was soft but urgent. The girl shook her head. Her lips turned blue. "What's your name?" Grace asked. The child whispered, "Lila." Ethan removed his coat and wrapped it around Lila's shoulders. "Where are your parents?" he asked. Lila lowered her gaze. "I don't have any." Thunder rolled overhead. Grace's heart ached. She could feel Lila trembling through the coat. The highway around them was empty now, silent except for the rain. Ethan glanced at the truck driver, who was too shocked to speak. Grace looked back at the SUV. Its front bumper was crumpled, but the cabin was intact. The baby had kicked inside her belly during the crash. She placed a protective hand over it, her eyes filled with tears of relief. Ethan crouched beside Lila. "You saved our lives," he said quietly. The girl didn't respond. She stared at the ground, rain running down her small face. "You're freezing. We can't leave you here." Lila's eyes flicked up at Grace, uncertain. "I don't want to cause trouble." "You already did more for us than anyone ever has," Grace said. Ethan nodded firmly. "You're coming with us, just for tonight." "You need warmth and food," Lila hesitated. Then she gave a tiny nod. Ethan helped her to her feet. The coat dragged on the ground behind her. The three of them walked back, toward the SUV under the relentless rain. The storm felt less threatening now. Grace glanced at Ethan. He was silent, his jaw set. She knew what he was thinking. Their lives had almost ended tonight, and this child had changed everything in a single moment. As the SUV pulled back onto the slick road, Grace held Lila's small hand. In that quiet grip, something shifted. A fragile thread connected their worlds. None of them could see how deep that thread would pull. The wipers swept away the rain as city lights glimmered faintly ahead. Inside the car, 3 lives had already begun to change. The wipers swept away the rain as city lights glimmered faintly ahead. Inside the car, 3 lives had already begun to change. Lila sat quietly in the back seat. The oversized coat swallowed her small frame. She watched the blurred city lights through the window, her breath fogging the glass. Grace turned halfway in her seat. "Are you warm enough?" she asked softly. Lila nodded, though her lips still trembled. Ethan's hands gripped the steering wheel, tighter than before. He kept glancing at the rearview mirror. The sight of that truck hanging above them replayed in his mind. This child had done something impossible. He couldn't explain it, but he couldn't ignore it either. The SUV pulled into their gated driveway. The mansion stood tall against the storm, lights glowing through wide windows. Ethan parked and opened the back door for Lila. The little girl stepped out carefully, her bare feet meeting smooth stone. Grace guided her inside. The marble floor was cold under Lila's toes. Warm air and the faint scent of vanilla filled the house. For a moment, her eyes widened at the high ceilings and sparkling chandelier. In the kitchen, Grace heated a bowl of soup. Lila wrapped her small hands around the steaming bowl. She sipped slowly, her shoulders relaxing as the warmth spread through her. Ethan watched from the doorway. He wasn't used to strangers in his home, but something about Lila's silence tugged at him. Grace knelt beside her. "Lila, where do you stay?" she asked gently. Lila's voice was barely a whisper, an old shed near the park. "I've been alone since last winter." Grace's chest tightened. She brushed a wet strand of hair from Lila's face. "No child should be out there, alone." Ethan stepped forward. "You'll stay here tonight," he said, firmly. Lila's green eyes darted between them. She nodded, but the uncertainty didn't leave her face. Grace led her upstairs to the guest room. The bed looked too big for her small body. As Grace tucked the blanket around her, Lila's eyes grew heavy. Downstairs, Ethan stood by the window, staring out at the storm. He knew this night was only the beginning of something far bigger than either of them understood. Downstairs, Ethan stood by the window, staring out at the storm. He knew this night was only the beginning of something far bigger than either of them understood. The thunder faded, leaving a heavy silence in the mansion. Grace came down the stairs quietly. She placed a hand on Ethan's arm. "She's asleep," she whispered. Her voice carried both relief and worry. Ethan didn't take his eyes off the rain. She held a truck in the air. "Grace, how is that even possible?" Grace exhaled, shaking her head. "I don't know. But she's just a child. A lonely one." The baby kicked again inside her belly. Grace winced slightly and rubbed her stomach. Ethan turned toward her, his jaw softening. He reached out, covering her hand with his. "We could have lost you both tonight," he said quietly. Upstairs, Lila stirred in her sleep. She dreamed of the accident, of flashing lights and loud horns, of her mother's voice, long gone, telling her to be brave. Tears slid down her cheeks even as she slept. Morning light broke through the curtains. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed and bright. Grace entered the guest room to find Lila sitting on the edge of the bed. The little girl looked small against the vast white sheets. "Good morning," Grace said warmly. Lila gave a shy smile. "Thank you for letting me stay." Grace handed her a clean towel and one of her old sweaters. "Let's get you warm and fed." In the kitchen, Ethan poured coffee, still deep in thought. Lila joined them quietly. Her damp hair curling around her face, she hesitated before speaking. "I can leave today if I'm in the way." Grace knelt in front of her. "You're not in the way. You're safe here." Ethan set his coffee down. "You saved Grace and our baby. You don't have to go back to that shed." For the first time, Lila's eyes brightened. Just a little. She took a tentative sip of orange juice. Outside, the sky cleared completely. The world looked calm, but Ethan felt a shift, a quiet certainty that their lives had turned toward something extraordinary. Grace set breakfast on the table. Lila hesitated before sitting down, her hands folded in her lap. Ethan watched her carefully. He saw more than a frightened child. He saw strength that defied reason. After breakfast, Grace placed a gentle hand on Lila's shoulder. "Would you like to see the garden?" she asked. Lila's green eyes lit up. She followed Grace through the glass doors onto the sunlit patio. The garden was wide and full of color. Flowers dripped with raindrops from last night's storm. The air smelled of wet earth and blooming roses. Lila bent down to touch a daisy. Her small fingers lingered on its petals. Grace watched, her with quiet wonder. "She's so careful with everything," she murmured. Ethan joined them outside. He crouched next to Lila. "You don't have to be afraid here,"
he said. Lila's lips curved into the faintest smile. "I haven't felt safe."
"In a long time." Grace knelt beside them. "You saved us. Lila, we want to be here for you now." For a moment, the three stood in silence. Then Lila whispered, "When my mom was alive, she used to say magic is meant to protect, not to harm. Last night I think she would have been proud." Grace's throat tightened. Ethan placed a hand on Lila's shoulder. "You're part of this family now," he said simply. The days that followed were different. Lila explored the mansion cautiously, her bare feet pattering against marble floors. Grace read to her in the evenings, her soft voice filling the quiet rooms. Ethan began leaving work earlier than usual, drawn home by something stronger than profit or meetings. One afternoon, Grace stood by the nursery window, watching Ethan and Lila chase each other through the garden. Her baby shifted inside her belly. A soft kick beneath her palm, tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness but from gratitude. Lila's laughter rang out, light and unguarded. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel like a child. Ethan stopped to catch his breath. He looked at Lila with a softness Grace had rarely seen in him. "Princess," he called, using the word without thinking. Lila beamed. She didn't need riches or promises. She only needed to feel wanted. As dusk painted the sky in pink and gold, Grace joined them on the grass. She wrapped her arms around Ethan's waist. Lila squeezed in between them, her small hands clutching theirs. The three of them stood together, the weight of the past night fading. Ethan looked at Grace, his voice low but sure. "I nearly lost you both. I won't take any of this for granted again." Grace leaned her head against his chest. Lila looked up at them, her green eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. In that quiet moment, none of them needed words. The near tragedy on the road had become the start of a new family. The orphan who once had no one now had a home. The CEO who thought he had everything discovered what mattered most, and Grace, once caught between fear and hope, felt safe. The wind rustled the trees softly. Somewhere in the distance, city lights began to glow. Inside the mansion, a warm dinner waited, and outside on the grass, three hearts stayed close. Bound by a single miraculous night, their world had changed forever, and for the first time, it felt whole.